Welcome back to The Explainer. You know, this is where we love to put really complex systems under the microscope. And today, oh boy, we are diving into a really fascinating bit of red tape that sits right at the crossroads of taxes, identity, and immigration. So let's just jump right in. The question is, how does the US even begin to tax people who can't get a social security number? And when you really think about it, that question opens up this huge dilemma right at the heart of the US tax system.
So, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at the core conflict, the main problem. Then we'll put the two key ID numbers, the SSN and the ITIN, side by side. After that, we'll walk through exactly how you get an ITIN, what its super strict limits are, what happens if your status changes, and then we'll wrap up by looking at why this whole system is just so important.
Okay, let's get into it. The tax ID mandate. You gotta understand, this whole system we're talking about, it wasn't just invented for fun. It was built to solve a really deep, fundamental contradiction that's literally baked into US law. And here it is, plain and simple. The US says everyone who earns money here has to file and pay taxes. No exceptions. But the main tool for doing that, the Social Security number, isn't available to everyone. It's like being told you have to open a locked door, but then not being given the key. That's the paradox right there. A legal duty, but no standard way to actually do it. So what did the government do to solve this puzzle? Well, they didn't change the lock. Nope. Instead, they just created a whole new key. And in doing that, they basically created two parallel universes for taxpayer IDs. So on one side, you've got the master key, right? The Social Security number, or SSN. This comes from the Social Security Administration, and it's all about work. It authorizes you to work, it tracks your earnings over your lifetime, and it's what qualifies you for benefits like retirement down the road. It's really the standard for US citizens and other folks who are legally allowed to work here. And then you have the other key, the ITIN, or Individual Taxpayer Identification Number. Now, the first thing you should notice is who issues it, a totally different agency, the IRS. And its purpose is incredibly specific. It's just a tax processing number, that's it. It's for people who have to file taxes but just can't get an SSN. In fact, it was created back in 1996 for this exact reason, to fix that legal gap we were just talking about. In this table, I think really lays it all out. It shows you the totally separate DNA of these two numbers. I mean, look at it. Different agencies, different primary purposes. One's about work and benefits, the other is only about filing taxes. And here's a little pro tip. You can always spot an ITIN because that 9-digit number will always start with the number 9. Okay, so if you need one of these specialized tax keys, how do you actually get one? Well, the process itself is a big clue because it's designed to prove you really need it for tax reasons. Basically, it boils down to 3 steps. You fill out a form, the W-7. You provide documents that prove who you are and that you have foreign status. And here's the kicker, the most important part. You have to attach a finished federal tax return right there with your application. See, it's not just about filling out a form. Attaching that tax return is how you prove to the IRS, hey, I have a legitimate tax reason for needing this number. And this right here, this shows one of the biggest hurdles in the whole process. Think about this. To prove your identity, you often have to mail in your original documents. We're talking about your passport, your birth certificate, or get a certified copy. Can you imagine being without your main ID for weeks, maybe even months while it's in the mail? That's a huge risk and a massive headache for a lot of people. Now, the IRS knows this is a big deal, so they've set up 3 different ways to apply. The first is the one we just talked about. You can mail everything in. Or, option 2, you can make an appointment at an IRS center. You go in, they look at your original documents, verify them right there on the spot, and hand them right back to you. Much safer. And the third way is to use something called an acceptance agent. These are folks authorized by the IRS to help you, and some of them can even certify your documents for you so you never have to mail them at all. All right, so now we know how you get an ITIN, but what can you actually do with it? Let's talk about the very clear, very strict lines the government has drawn around this thing. This is where that whole for tax purposes only idea becomes really, really real. Okay, look at this table. The does column is pretty short. It lets you file your taxes, obviously, and kind of as a side effect, it lets you open an interest-bearing bank account because banks need some kind of taxpayer ID. But that does not column, that's where the story is. It absolutely does not authorize you to work. It gives you zero Social Security benefits. It doesn't change your immigration status one bit, and it actually disqualifies you from getting certain tax credits, like the big one, the Earned Income Tax Credit.
So you might think, with all those limits, what's the big deal? Well, the financial impact is absolutely massive. Just get a load of this number. In 2019, ITN filers contributed a net $5.8 billion in taxes. That's billion with a B. So no, this isn't just some small niche program. It's a critical piece of the puzzle for tax compliance in the US.
And if you're still not convinced, the IRS literally spells it out for you in black and white right on the application form. This quote says it all. It's not hidden in the fine print, it's a headline warning. An ITN is for federal tax purposes, period, full stop.
So what happens if things change? You know, the system has a very clear pecking order. You can think of the ITIN as a temporary placeholder because there's a super strict, non-negotiable rule for what happens when someone can finally get that master key, the SSN. All right, so let's walk through a scenario. Say someone has been using an ITIN to file taxes for years. Then their situation changes, their status is adjusted, and suddenly they're eligible to get a real Social Security number. The second that new SSN is issued, poof, the ITIN is basically useless. The IRS rule is crystal clear. You must stop using your ITIN right away. Not next year, not next week. Immediately. There's no choice, no overlap.
And from that day on, the Social Security number is the only number you can use for taxes. Now, the cool thing is the IRS will actually merge your old tax history from the ITIN over to your new SSN, so you have one continuous record. But that ITIN, it's officially and permanently retired. Okay, so we've been deep in the weeds of tax IDs. What's the big takeaway here? What does all this tell us? Well, it really shows us a system that was created to be practical, but it's gotten way more complex over time.
When you boil it all down, the ITIN is really just a tool for the IRS. You can think of it as a clever, practical patch on a bigger system, not a total redesign. It solves that legal paradox we talked about at the beginning, how to get tax payments from people who are locked out of the normal system. And by doing that, it brings millions of people into tax compliance.
But, and this is the big final question we're left with, is that sustainable? This thing was designed only for filing taxes, but now you see banks using it, some DMVs, even real estate agents. So as this simple tax tool gets tangled up in huge debates about identity, finance, and immigration, can it really stay just a simple number for filing taxes? That's the real dilemma going forward, and it's something to keep your eye on.